Today, we're diving into a story that's honestly hard to wrap your head around. We're talking about Dresden, a city of just monumental beauty, and how it was almost instantly erased from existence.
And that really is the central question here. How does something that feels so solid, so permanent, just vanish? This isn't just a story about destruction, you see. It's about how incredibly fragile our history really is, how an entire world, an entire architectural language could be silenced in just a few hours.
So before all this happened, you have to understand Dresden wasn't just a city, it was a statement. I mean, they called it the Florence on the Elbe. That tells you everything, right? It was the absolute pinnacle of European art, culture, and ambition.
Seriously, try to picture it. Walking through its streets must have been like being inside a living museum. You had this incredible mix of Baroque magnificence and Renaissance precision, but there was something else, something about the engineering that just puzzled people. The buildings felt way too ornate, almost impossibly grand, for the time they were supposedly built.
And this is where we get to the real paradox of Dresden. On one hand, you have the official history, right? It tells you one story about the tools and the building techniques they had back in the 18th century. But then, you look at the buildings themselves. The physical evidence just doesn't seem to line up. We're talking about immense stone blocks that shouldn't have been movable, intricate details that seem impossible to carve with the tools of the time, and this overall look, it just felt so much older, almost like it was from a different, more advanced civilization.
And look, this wasn't just some vague feeling people had. You could point to specific buildings. Take the Zwinger Palace. It was so densely sculpted, it looked more like it was carved out of a single piece of rock than actually constructed. Or the Japanisches Palais, where the masonry looked way, way more weathered than its 18th century records said it should be. And all over the city, you'd see these repeating motifs, these massive, oversized archways and giant stone blocks that almost hinted at some kind of forgotten architectural tradition.
And then came the night that changed everything. This incredible legacy of stone, in just a matter of hours, wasn't just damaged. No, it was subjected to a force that was almost geological.
This quote really gets to the heart of it. You have to understand, we are not talking about a normal fire here. The firestorm created heat so extreme, so intense, that it started to literally unmake the city. The very stone, the ultimate symbol of permanence, was being turned into something fluid, something unrecognizable.
The destruction was total. First, the stone was shattered. The thermal shock was so intense that these massive blocks that had stood for centuries just burst apart. Then everything was scorched. The beautiful facades were burned black. All those intricate details just wiped away under a thick layer of soot. It was like they aged 1,000 years in a single night.
And then, the most unbelievable part. Things started to melt. Yes, melt. Eyewitnesses saw the copper domes on churches, the ironwork on balconies, literally liquefy and drip down onto the streets. The temperatures were just off the charts, far beyond anything you'd see in a normal city fire.
And this single image really captures the finality of it all. The Frauenkirche, the city's iconic dome, an absolute marvel of engineering. For hours, it just stood there against the inferno. People said it glowed from the inside like a giant ember. And then, it just gave way. It imploded, collapsing into this massive 10-meter-high mound of rubble, a literal volcanic mound of what used to be a masterpiece, and it would just sit there like that for decades.
So the crucial point to grasp here is that this wasn't just about losing buildings. Think of it like this: an entire library, a physical archive of centuries of craftsmanship, engineering, and artistry was turned to ash in one go. And when you look at the specifics, it's just staggering. The Zwinger Palace, it had hundreds of unique statues. It was reduced to a jagged skeleton. The Residenzschloss, the royal palace, completely gutted. Its colossal pillars were just lying on the ground like a forest of felled trees. And the Semperoper Opera House with that facade covered in angels and mythological figures, all of it was just pulverized, gone.
But you know what's just mind-blowing? Even in all that ruin, the sheer scale of the original vision was still there. You see these photos from the aftermath, and there are rescue workers standing next to a single piece of rubble, and they look miniature. It really gives you a sense of the colossal, almost superhuman ambition of the people who first built this city.
And that physical erasure, well, it led to something so much deeper, something way harder to rebuild. It led to a kind of cultural amnesia, a loss of collective memory.
So, what is cultural amnesia? Well, it's what happens when the physical things that anchor a society's identity just get wiped out. All the shared stories, that sense of place, that tangible connection to your past, it gets severed. I mean, think about it. You can't take your kids to see a palace that's just not there anymore.
And you can actually see how that lineage gets broken, step by step. First, the physical proof is just gone. The palaces, the archives, all of it. Then, the practical, hands-on knowledge disappears. The workshops are destroyed, the master craftsmen have no one to teach their skills to, and finally, the next generation grows up in a completely different world. For them, the mysteries and the grandeur of the old city, they're not a real thing they can see and touch. They're just stories.
So where does that leave us? What is the real, lasting legacy of a loss this total? What do we even have left when an entire world is basically reduced to a collection of old photographs?
Now, don't get me wrong, the city has done a truly remarkable job restoring some of its landmarks, but it's so important to understand this point. What we see today is not reconstruction. It's a modern interpretation of an ancient design. The original stones, the carvings with the original tool marks, the actual touch of those long-gone artisans, the vast majority of that is gone for good. It's a beautiful echo for sure, but it is not the original voice.
And that brings us right back to where we started, to that initial mystery. If the physical proof is gone, if we can't study the original buildings or analyze the materials, can we ever really know the story of those builders? Can we solve the riddle of Dresden's impossible architecture? Or are all those secrets just lost to the ashes forever?
Because in the end, this is what we're left with. The photographs that survived, they aren't just pictures of old buildings. They are the last portals we have into a world that literally no longer exists. They are the final, silent testimony to a city of stone legends, a masterpiece that vanished overnight.